we are cleaning a Glock today. This is a Glock 34, but all Glocks break down the same, annoyingly so. So first things first, anytime you're cleaning a gun, you need to check, double check, triple check, make sure it's safe and empty. So first things first, I'm gonna drop my magazine. There's a button on this side of the gun. I'm going to check my chamber. I open that up, look inside. I will even distract myself and look again, because I'm human and I want to make sure I saw what I saw. Point it in a very safe direction, pull the trigger. Trigger needs to be dead. Taking my dominant hand, which is already on the gun, I'm going to wrap it around the back of the slide. I just need to squeeze my hand just a little bit to pull the slide back just a smidge. There's a lever, it's actually called the slide lock. There's one of these on both sides. I'm going to grab it with my pinchers, hold it, and pull it down. This is annoying. Don't put your gloves on before you do this. As I hold these down, I'm going to release my dominant hand slowly. And as you can see, the slide is starting to move forward. I can release the slide lock and slowly let this guy come forward and off. I have the frame of the pistol. I'm going to set that down. I have the slide. You'll see your recoil spring here. Remember how this goes in, because it will need to go back in that way when you put it back together. I'm going to pull it up here. It is under a bit of spring tension. Just pull that guy out, set it to the side. Then we got to get our barrel out. So I take my finger and push it up from the bottom, grab it, and pull it up. Now we have the 4-5 basic parts of a semi-automatic pistol. I'm going to take my magazine and set it off to the side because I don't need to mess with that usually ever. Now it's time to put on our gloves. This is where it gets dirty. I do recommend wearing gloves. You don't have to, but some of this stuff's pretty nasty and it's really hard to wash off your hands, so wear some gloves. I'm going to take the barrel, and this is where a lot of carbon buildup will be. This is where the explosion's happening, and we need to make sure that this feed ramp, where your round is going up into your chamber, is pretty clean, and on the inside of the barrel needs to be clean. So I'm going to take my solvent. This is a cleaner. I like to consider this a wash, and your lubrication is the wax. Talk about that later. I'm going to spray it inside the barrel and get that doing its job. So it's going to start breaking down the carbon in there. Set the barrel down. Then I'm going to take the recoil spring. I just wipe this off with a microfiber cloth that I use for gun cleaning on a normal basis, so it has a little bit of residual oil or solvent on it, but you don't need to do much with this spring other than just wipe it down and just make sure there's no buildup on it. Set that off to the side. Then I'm going to take the frame. You'll see there's a lot of moving parts in there. Glock's pretty simple, but I'm just going to brush off all that carbon with a fairly clean nylon brush. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Let me get my bonus hair out of there. But I'm just going to go through here and brush loose all this carbon. There really shouldn't be any reason that this stuff is really gummed up in here if you maintain your gun on a normal basis. So I'm paying good attention to the slide rails, so these little lips that come over the side, making sure that those are pretty clean. I don't want to see a buildup of carbon in there. And then I'm just going to brush loose all the carbon that's inside here. Now that I've got all that loose, I like to use a patch. You can use an old t-shirt, or I even heard a student recommend buying a flat sheet from Dollar General and cutting it up into a bunch of pieces. That was pretty genius. So I just take a patch and just wipe off the excess carbon that I just loosened up with the brush. It doesn't have to be perfect. You will never get this thing sparkling clean. Frame is good. We're done with this guy. The barrel's still sitting. I'm gonna go on to the slide now. So on the slide, you're gonna see a couple things. So first off, this is your striker channel back here. We're gonna try to avoid getting solvent or oils in there. There's a hole right here called your weep hole. We're gonna avoid getting stuff down in there as well. You got the breech face, and you can actually right now see the firing pin sticking out a little bit. That's what strikes the back of the round of ammunition on the primer. That little guy will fall back in there if I push on it a little bit, but we're going to make sure that we don't, we're gonna try to keep stuff out of that channel as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to, you can spray the solvent directly on the slide, or you can use your brush. I usually just put a couple sprays in there and just start brushing. Now I mentioned don't get stuff in these channels and these holes. It's not end of the world if you get a little bit in there. It's just, I don't want you squirting oil in there or pouring stuff into those holes. I'm paying good attention to the slide rails here as well. That's what's allowing the slide to move reliably on the frame, and we definitely want that, so pay close attention to that. These brushes have thinner brushes as well that kind of help get in there. Now when it's time to clean the breech face, there are a couple things to pay attention to. So I'm going to hold the slide like this, so the breech face is facing downward, so we're not getting all that stuff into the firing pin channel. And then I also want to clean underneath the extractor. So if you get in here close, there's a little hook right here. That's called your extractor. That's going to hook onto the rim of the cartridge and pull it out whenever the slide comes back. So it's important that that stays clean. So when I'm brushing the breech face, make sure it's angled down. I'm going to make sure my brush gets underneath that hook really well, and it cleans that pretty good. I'll just give it a look, make sure it looks pretty good. I'm going to take another patch or a rag and just going to wipe all that carbon that I loosened up. I'm actually going to use a towel here. I wouldn't recommend using paper towels. Get like a microfiber cloth or something, and you can use them for a while before you need to wash them. But just wipe off any excess stuff. Again, it doesn't have to be sparkling. That's pretty much it for cleaning the slide. Now it's time to clean the barrel. That solvent is already doing its job on the inside of the barrel, but I need to clean this face here really well. So you got your feed ramp that definitely needs to be cleaned. I like to see that nice and smooth, remove any of the carbon buildup that gets on there. Sometimes you'll see this stuff just flake away. It just depends on how much you've shot it before you've cleaned it. And then also around where it locks up into the slide, you'll see bits of carbon start to cake up. If a nylon brush doesn't do the job, you can use a bronze brush. Some people use stainless steel brushes. I'm not a fan of that because the steel could be scratched. Some people would argue that, but I do not like steel brushes. So I use bronze. It does the job pretty well. So that's a nice clean feed ramp. So now we need to clean the inside of the barrel. Back in the day, you'd use one of these fancy bore brushes and put that on a cleaning rod and have to make multiple passes through your barrel with bore brush and patches and bore mops and all kinds of stuff. But now they've come out with this, and I say now, this thing's been around forever, but it's called a bore snake. It's got a rope and it's got some bore brushes built into it. And just a bunch of nylon here. It's got a fancy handle. So what you can do, since we already put solvent in here, I'm just gonna run this bore snake through my barrel. Just drop the little aglet. Yeah, that's an aglet in case you didn't know what that was called. There you go. You can pull the bore snake through. It's gonna give you some pretty good resistance. If it doesn't give you resistance, then you should get a new one. So as those bore brushes are doing their job, they're going to loosen up all the carbon, and then as you pull the rope through, it's going to wipe off that carbon that's left behind. When you look down your barrel, you should be able to see spiraling. That's called rifling. And carbon tends to build up in those grooves there, so we need to make sure that those stay clean. So if you need to run the bore snake through a few times, that's okay, but you do want to see clean rifling after you're done. So my barrel is relatively clean, so we're pretty much good there. So that's it as far as cleaning goes. Now we need to protect the metal, and we need to lubricate certain parts of the gun. Whenever you take apart your gun, maybe not the first time, but after you've been shooting it for a while, you'll start to see some wear marks on the metal, on where metal is rubbing against other metal. So we need to be aware of that, and that's where we're going to specifically lubricate. We'll go through it step by step. When it comes to lubricating, well, let's protect the metal first. I like to protect the metal. So you can use one of these silicone cloths, or you can just put some oil on a patch, or use the microfiber cloth that's been collecting oil over the period of time that you've been cleaning guns. But these are infused with, I don't know how they infuse it with silicone, but it's got oil on it basically. So what I do is I just take this guy, I don't wipe my frame off with this because this will make it oily, but I just wipe down all the metal of my gun, inside the slide, I do it outside the slide. This is the wax. This is basically protecting the metal against the elements. If this is a gun that you carry on you all the time and it's exposed to salt and sweat and changing temperatures, it's important that you protect the metal. It'll make your gun last a lot longer. Now you could probably get away with never doing this for many, many years and not have a whole lot of issues, but if you want this gun to last forever, then take care of it. So I've wiped down all the metal. It is a little shiny, but I'll go over it with a towel afterwards. I also wiped down the barrel here. Just a quick wipe down. Okay, so it's washed, it's waxed. Now it's time to lubricate specifically. Slide rails need to be lubricated. Now, how you do this is kind of a personal approach. I don't like putting it on the rails on the slide. I like to put it up here on these 4 individual points because it seems more precise to me and easier to keep track of. So get your oil. I highly suggest something with a little needle nose tip. It makes applying oil way better. So you got 4 points. I'm going to put a small drop of oil on each one. And then on Glocks specifically, we're going to drop 1 drop of oil underneath this little hook here. So this is part of the connector and the trigger bar. They rub up against each other underneath this hook. So we want to put a small drop of oil under there. So that's it on the frame as far as oiling goes. On the slide, if you look at the wear spots, you can see that there's definitely some wear right there. That's where the barrel, the lug is actually, well, the barrel itself is actually rubbing on the inside of the slide there. So I'm just going to put a drop of oil. I just kind of rub it in with my finger so it doesn't drip out of the way. That's it with the slide. And then you can see that the barrel has obvious rub marks here. So I'm going to put a big drop of oil on the barrel, and then I just kind of rub this in with my finger as well. You can use a patch, whatever makes you happy. You can see here that there's a good little wear mark there. So honestly, I just had enough oil on my finger, I can just rub it on there. That's pretty good. So that's it. Now we're going to put it back together. So we're going to put the barrel in the slide first. So I pick up the barrel. The muzzle end needs to go in first, and then the lugs are going to be facing upward. If you put it in upside down, it's pretty obvious, so you can flip it around. So I just drop that in, push it down into place. Then I'm going to wipe off the oil on my hands and grab the recoil spring. Now we remembered how this guy came out, but the muzzle end needs to go in first as well. So I'm going to put that part in, And it's not gonna fit in there unless I compress it a little bit. So I'm gonna squeeze it, and then I'm gonna push it down onto that little notch, so it's down, it's level. Now I need to put the slide back on the frame. I'm gonna hold the gun in my dominant hand like I'd be shooting it. I'm gonna hold the slide. I'm going to line it up with these slide rails here and very carefully slide this back on. I'm gonna take my time. I don't need to jam it on real fast or anything. Back here, you'll notice that the trigger bar kind of gets in the way, and we need to make sure it fits through that hole. And then you encounter your ejector here. Make sure that goes in there the right way. And then just keep sliding it back on and rack the slide. Now the gun is back in working order. I'm going to set the gun down, take off my gloves, and I'm just going to give it one more wipe down just to get all that excess oil off. Wipe down the frame, any lint or anything that has accumulated over time. Rack the slide a few times, make sure it's pointed in a safe direction. Still always check. Pull the trigger, that's a function check. You can hold it back, cycle the slide, make sure it resets, pull the trigger. Just do a little function check there. And that's it. You have a clean Glock.